Welcome back. We have been looking at the idea of interpretation and how to do that. We gave some general principles, and then we looked a little bit at some grammar principles, and now we're going to go a little bit deeper into the grammar side. But before we do that, I want to touch on one point that's very important, and your textbook that you've been reading speaks to this in the Introduction to Bible Interpretation. The authors comment on the issue and the question about meaning. Now, if you would, pull up the document that you have uploaded there called Theories of Interpretation. Theories of Interpretation. I'm going to let you read this because it'll give you a detailed understanding of what I'm going to say in about 3 minutes. I'm going to say it in 3 minutes. You're going to read it. It'll take you longer than 3 minutes to read it. But the question is meaning. Where is meaning to be found? And as the slide overhead shows you, if meaning's in the middle, well, where do we find the meaning? And there have been 3 different views of this. One is that the author is where the meaning is to be found. The author, who is the encoder or the sender, we're looking for that. So we're looking for Paul. Well, we're looking for the author's intent. We're looking for the meaning that Paul encoded. But others would say, well, although that's good at a philosophical level, we don't know Paul. He's not around. He's in heaven. But what we do have is the text from Paul. So Paul is the author, but Paul is the author of the text. Paul is the encoder, but the text is the code. Paul was the sender, but what he sent was a message. So meaning actually should be found in the text that's been coded as a message that was given to us from the author who encoded it as the sender. And then a third view would come around and say, well, yeah, all that's true. However, we only have a text from Paul. We only have a text, but those words on a page mean nothing until I read them. And therefore, it is the reader who is the decoder and the receiver. It's the reader of the text from the author. It's the decoder of the code from the encoder. It's the receiver of the message from the sender. And therefore, in one sense, all 3 are essential. Now, hear me straight. Many who talk about the reader being the interpreter, they call this reader response theory. And the danger of reader response theory is when what you say is that I will determine the meaning and it's whatever I want it to mean, not what Paul meant it to mean. That is not what we are saying. That's called reader response theory, and we do not agree with that because that is total subjectivity. But on the other hand, it is true that the reader is involved because the reader is the decoder receiver of the text, which is the coded message. But the coded message only has any meaning because it came from a sender, the encoder, the author. Hence, I would suggest that meaning actually has to come from the author, which is the world behind the text itself, which is the world in the text, and the reader, the world in front of the text. So I would suggest that all 3 are essential for a communication to actually take place. We cannot really find the meaning until we find the author in the text as I read it. So the meaning is to be found by all 3 of these. Hear me straight, I say this again. This is not reader response theory. It is saying that the reader has to have a place in it because the reader is the only one that's living. The text isn't living and the author's not living. The reader is living and appropriating the words of the text from the mind of the author and making the interpretation. So I take it that all 3 have to function in this capacity. Meaning, and this is from E.D. Hirsch in his book Validity and Interpretation, meaning is that which is represented by the text. It is what the author meant by his use of particular sign sequence. It is what the signs represent. So there's an author, there's a text, and then there's a sign sequence is what the author used to represent what he meant. So that's where we find meaning. Now, significance, he suggests, on the other hand, names a relationship between that meaning and a person or a conception or a situation or indeed anything imaginable. So Hirsch would say the meaning comes from the author in the text as we read it. The significance is in a sense, the relationship of the meaningful text to a situation, which is a relationship with a person or conception or situation or indeed anything imaginable. Your authors talk some of this in the textbook, but this is just kind of a quick way of looking at it. And what I'm trying to really say here is, I believe we look at the author's intent, that's the world behind the text itself, that's the world in the text, and the reader, who is the world in front of the text. When all three are operating in the proper order, author's intent, textual intent, reader's intent, when all three are operational, we can come at the meaning. And once we come to the meaning, we can then see the significance of the meaning as it is, in a sense, applied or principalized to us in a relationship. Now, if you will read the handout called Theory of Interpretation or Theories of Interpretation, I try to outline those three with a little more, shall we say, detail and meaningfulness. Now, that's kind of abstract and big picture. Let's go down to concrete. Let's come down to the text, because we believe the inspiration, authority of the Bible, the inspiration and inerrancy of the Bible, the infallibility of the Bible, and therefore what does the Bible say? Well, we can't know what the Bible says until we look at the very words. And words come in a sequence. Words come in a grammar package. So we need to understand the grammar package. So if you would pull up the handout that's been loaded for you, Discourse Analysis, Sentence Diagramming. Discourse analysis, sentence diagramming. Now, some of you are going to go back and say, wait a minute, I think I vaguely remember this in 8th grade. And you would be right. And some of you are saying, I vaguely remember this in 9th grade English. And you would be right. But if you're under the age of 40 or 45, you may never have taken this in 8th grade or 9th grade. So we are going to look at this. And for you who are English majors and who know all this, pure review. For those of you who don't know it, be delighted. We're going to take a look at this anyway. I think you'll find this helpful. So in this section, all we're trying to do is get a brief understanding of how to diagram a sentence, and then you're going to have a homework assignment that includes you taking a passage of Scripture and diagramming it. So this may be review for some of you. It may be new for some of you. In either case, let's have a look. So sentence diagramming, or grammatical diagramming, is concerned mainly with identifying the grammatical relationships between words and phrases. This method is concerned with identifying the subject of a sentence, the main verb, participles, modifying adjectives, adverbs, dependent clauses, those kinds of things. The method of sentence diagramming. Although there are a number of different methods and conventions for sentence diagramming, whichever one is chosen must be used consistently. Most, if not all, methods share a basic structure. The basic structure is this. You start with a subject, and then you have a predicate, or the verbal idea. The subject and predicate of a sentence lay on the main line, separated by a vertical line. This is the basic requirement of a sentence, and is often the main point of a sentence. So that's what you look for first. Well, some of you are saying, well, what exactly is the subject? Well, the subject is a word or a group of words specifying that about which something is said or asserted. So let me give you an example. The boy hit the ball. The boy in the house is sleepy. The boy who hit the ball is in the house. Neatness offends me. So the subject is that which is involved in the action. The predicate, that's the verbal idea. A group of words would say something or assert something about the subject. So, Spot, the dog, jumped. Jumped is the predicate, and it indicates something about the subject, Spot. Spot jumped over the wall. So there you have your subject, there you have your predicate, and then you have something else later. Spot jumped because he wanted to. Spot is a dog. Spot is old. The old dog named Spot was hit by a car. So Spot is the object. Spot can be modified. He's the old dog named Spot. And then there's the verbal, was hit by a car. Now what about a clause? Clause is a group of words which consist of both a subject and a predicate. So the funny clown, so clown is the subject, but modified by the clause the funny clown died of laughter. Died is the verbal predicate, but then of laughter clarifies how, in this case the mode, how he died. Because you, subject, are too young. You as a subject are too young, but all of that is a clause. Since he came into town, you see the object, you see the verb, and it's a clause. You get the idea. Sentence. Number 4, the sentence, a clause which constitutes a completed thought or statement. So, the funny clown died of laughter, period. A phrase, that's simply a group of words. Modifiers are words or groups of words that add to the meaning of another word. How do they add? They describe it, they limit it, they qualify it, they make some kind of comment. Now, parts of speech, we've already seen some of these. Nouns and pronouns, adjectives and verbs, or predicates, adverbs that modify verbs, adjectives modify nouns, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, and interjections. These are the parts of speech. In English, these are parts of speech, and in Greek you have similar parts of speech. But for us, we're looking in English. So how does a noun work? Well, a noun is a word indicating a person, place, or thing. Paul, man, love, equality, church, army, apartment, or apartment house. These are nouns. So the use of a noun. A noun can be a subject. Tom, that's the noun, that's the subject, hit the ball. Or it can be a direct object. Tom, subject, hit, verbal. What did he hit? The direct object, the ball. Ball and the ball. So the is making the ball more specific. So Tom hit the ball. Notice the diagram. Tom on the far left, there's your subject. Hit is the verbal. The ball is the direct object in this case. Well, what about an indirect object? Tom gave Harry the ball. So Tom gave the ball, but who'd he give it to? Who's the indirect object? Would be Harry. So Tom, subject, gave, there's your predicate, the ball, the direct object, to Harry, or just Harry. Harry is the indirect object of the verb. So the indirect object is drawn with a line down and slanted over. Now there are a number of ways of doing this. The safest way is whatever system you use, you can identify and say, just put an I-O, indirect object by Harry. Put a D-O, direct object by the ball. What about an object of preposition? So we're looking at a prepositional phrase. Tom hit the ball, where? Into the woods. So Tom, the subject, hit the verb. What did he hit? The ball. That's the direct object. But into the woods is modifying where it was hit, the location. So Tom hit into the woods the ball. So the preposition into, and then the object of the preposition is the woods. So Tom hit the ball. Where did he hit the ball? Into where? Into the woods. The woods becomes the object of the preposition. The preposition's modifying the verb, and the verb tells us what Tom, the subject, did to the ball, the direct object. Direct address. Tom, be careful. Tom, be careful. Simple, short. Predicate nominative. Tom became the president. So Tom became, there's your predicate, there's your subject, subject, predicate. But what did he become? Well, he became a predicate nominative, the president, and so you notice that the line slants back, showing that this nominative is bent towards a verbal idea, so it's called a predicate nominative. What about appositional statements? Tom, who is the president, I mean, I'm making that up, but Tom equals the president, hit the ball. So Tom, and then you could put in parentheses, the president hit the ball. So Tom hit the ball, but the president's modifying who Tom is. So you could say the president hit the ball, Tom hit the ball. It's saying the same thing. So those words are in apposition to each other. They're in apposition to each other. Tom, whiz the president, hit the ball. Now, characteristics of nouns, page 3. Sometimes they're accompanied by article, a, an, or the. There's a definite article, the. Tom hit ball. Tom hit the ball, and the modifies the ball and makes it definite. So notice the is slanted down under ball, showing what it's modifying. Indefinite article, John 1:1. God, a God, do we say it's a God? Do we say the God? It's indefinite, so it may not be as clear as we would like. Some nouns they possess number. They can be singular or plural. They can refer to one. They can refer to more than one. Sin, not sins, in 1 John 1:29. Very important to notice. Sometimes they possess gender, masculine, feminine, or neuter. That can be true in Greek. That can be true in English. One should be aware of the effect of the meaning of a noun, which is a modifier attached, the modifier attached to it has, the impact that can be. And note that whole clauses can function in a sentence just as a noun would, thus making it a, surprise, noun clause, or a nominal clause. Pronouns. You all know what pronouns are. A word which can be substituted for a noun as to its use in a sentence. There are a number of them there. He and I and you and this and those. Pronouns are used to kind of not make a sentence so redundant. So a pronoun can be used as a subject. He, as opposed to Tom hit the ball. You don't want to say Tom again. Tom hit the ball. Tom did this, Tom did this, Tom did this. He, substitute, he hit the ball. Or as a direct object. They hit each other. Instead of saying they hit Bill, Jim, and Harry. No, they hit each other. Or as an indirect object. They gave him a ball. Him is the indirect object. They gave ball, but who they give it to, the indirect object, is him, and him is a pronoun. Or as an object of the preposition. They jumped on him. On is a preposition. Him is the pronoun, object of the preposition. Direct address. You come here. Instead of Tom come here, you come here. In apposition, not used very much. Usually it's apposition's got something much more specific. Characteristics of pronouns. They possess number, normally. They can be singular, I. They can be plural, we, figure of speech. They possess gender, sure, he, she, and it, true in Greek and in English. Possesses a person in some case. Could be first person, second person, third person. And every pronoun has an antecedent. An antecedent. That's the word that it's related to. That's the word group for which it stands. Tom is visiting Tom's relatives because Tom has not seen Tom's relatives in 3 years. Tom is visiting his relatives because he has not seen them in 3 years. So the antecedent is what comes before what the pronoun is standing for. So whenever you see a pronoun, you want to say, wait a minute, what is that he representing? What's that he connected to? Very important, especially if you look at 2 Peter chapter 2, which we will look at here in a while, or later on, we will see how that works. Adjectives. Words which modify words that modify nouns or pronouns. So, the book, wait a minute, what about the big book? So we have the book, but it's the with the article, and it's modified by an adjective, big. So book is on the line, and then underneath, the book, big book. So the big book, followed by the predicate. The clever man, or he is clever. He is clever. Clever is leaning towards the predicate, in terms of being modifying. D, note the phrases or even whole clauses can function just as an adjective would, thus making them adjective or adjectival phrases or adjectival clauses. Adjective phrase, the boy in the band, that's an adjective phrase, in the band, is my brother. Adjective clause, the boy who plays the trombone is my cousin. So, boy, modified by the article, is the predicate. Cousin, but whose cousin? My cousin. And then who plays the trombone specifies or clarifies who the boy is. The boy is modified by who plays trombone. So who is the subject, plays is the verb. The trombone becomes the object of this comment about the boy. So you have a diagram on top with a diagram underneath connected by those slanted lines, or those dash lines, I guess, that connect them. Now what about verbs? Verbs are very rich in meaning, and in the Greek language, at least in biblical Greek, Koine Greek, they represent all sorts of things in regarding to the aspect, sometimes the time element. Verbs then also contain the mood that's communicated. So in the Greek language, which you're going to study, much more. Here we are in English, basic English, trying to figure this out. Words which can be used to tell or assert something about a subject. So, characteristic of verbs. There's an indication of the person in the verb. So, I see the ball. Who sees? I see. Or he sees the ball. Indication of the number in verbs. I am anxious, singular. We are anxious, plural. There's also possessiveness of voice. It possesses voice. It can be active or passive. The subject is the agent of the action, if it's active. Passive, the subject receives the action, or the recipient of the action. So, John hit the ball, right? That's active. John hit the ball. Passive, John, passive tense, was hit, and then by the ball. So John was hit, in the case, by the ball, passive. They also possess mood. Indicative mood, that's simply a statement of fact. Subjunctive mood, that's a hypothetical mood. Imperative, that's a command. So, I closed the door, that's simply indicative. If he were only to close the door, that's kind of a wish, a subjunctive. Close the door, that's the imperative. All three of these come in the Greek language as well. And then verbs possess tense. They have voice, they have mood, they have tense. Present tense, I come. Past tense, I came. Future tense, I shall come or I will come. Present perfect, I have come. Present perfect. And then past perfect, I shall have come. Not as familiar. Note the helping or auxiliary verbs shall, have, or had, which merely help indicate the tense. So those translation values are clarifying the nuance and the force of the tense. Now, there's a thing called aspect, or the kind of action, and it's sometimes indicated by English verbs, like I study. That could be a habitual aspect. I study. I am studying is a continuing or a progressing action. So sometimes, well, in Greek, definitely, and sometimes in English, you see this, the type of action that's indicated by the verb. Verbs can have emphasis is sometimes indicated by a verb. Look at, I did my homework. I did do my homework. There's one is more emphatic. I did do my homework. That also includes an illocutionary element of atmosphere and energy, right? One's just a statement, I did my homework. The other is, I did do my homework. A little stronger, emphasis. Other ideas are sometimes expressed in the verb form. Permission. The boss said that I may work tonight. That's permission. Possibility. It may rain tonight. Rain is the verb, but it may rain. Obligation or compulsion. You ought to work tonight. Or you must work tonight. Or you should work tonight. Obligation. And then there are other verbs that are called verbals. Let's look at a couple of them. One is infinitive, or an infinitive. Verbal idea used as a noun, preceded by the English word to run, to walk, to jump. To walk in the mud is great fun. Infinitive phrase. To walk in the mud, modified, and then is great fun. Notice how it's on a stilt. So the infinitive to walk, where, in, modified by mud. What kind of mud? The mud. But commenting on walking, or to walk, is fun. What kind of fun? It's great fun. The importance of the infinitive can be illustrated in 1 Timothy chapter 2, where Paul gives the instruction, I do not allow a woman to teach or to be an authority. He uses two infinitives. Now the question there is he using two infinitives to speak of one issue, to speak in an authoritative manner, or does he mean it in two to be two, to speak and to not have authoritative manner? So is it one or two meaningful infinitives, or the two put together? That's an exegetical decision that you get to make, but it's an illustration of the use of an infinitive. We're going to skip gerunds, move to participles, because they're very similar, but you're probably more familiar with participles. These are verbal ideas used as verbs or adjectives. So, totally burned, totally burned, the roof collapsed. Running swiftly, I came across a finish line. Now you say, wait a minute, burned doesn't have an ing, so how can it be a participle? Not all participles have to have ing. Running swiftly, running is modifying, running is the participial way of showing this ongoing action. Swiftly is modifying it, and then I came across the finish line. As a verb, I was testing the water. So it can function adjectively, it can function verbally. Participles have both adjectival usage and verbal. In Greek, they also can have adverbial and adjectival nuance. You have to determine through not just the form, but sometimes the structure, but the form, but also the usage that's involved. Adverbs, you're familiar with words which modify verbs. They can modify adjectives sometimes and other adverbs. So, the man walked. How did he walk? Slowly. The man is too fast, so the man is fast, but let's modify fast. What kind of fast? Too fast. So, man is fast. Man, what kind? The. Is, what kind is? Too fast, and so we have fast there functioning to modify it. The man walked very slowly. So note that the phrase or even a whole clause or whole clauses can function just as an adverb would, thus making them what? Adverbial, an adverbial phrase or an adverbial clause. An adverb phrase. The boy fell into the mud. Okay, so into the mud. Adverbial clause. The boy fell when he tripped over my foot. When gives us a temporal indicator. Trip, the verbal. And what did he trip over? Over the foot. So we've got adjectives, we've got adverbs, we have prepositions, and then prepositional phrases. Words used to indicate the relationship of a noun or pronoun to some other word in the sentence. Note prepositional phrases, the noun or pronoun with its modifiers, which is connected to the rest of the sentence by a preposition. So the man with the big round eyes is the murderer, or the man is a murderer. Which kind of man? The man with the big round eyes. Conjunctions, words used to connect, and this becomes very important. They can be coordinating conjunction or subordinating conjunction. Coordinating conjunction connects conjunctions which connect words and phrases and clauses which are coordinated. They go together. They're coordinated. They're not subordinated. They're coordinated. So Paul and Barnabas, right, coordinated, went, there's your verb, where'd they go? To Galatia. Paul went to Crete and to Galatia. So Paul, the subject, went the verb. Where did he go? To, but then the coordinating conjunction and connects Crete and Galatia. Jesus was baptized, but John was hesitant. Jesus, the subject, was baptized, the verb, but contrast, John was hesitant. So here is a coordinating conjunction, but putting these two together, not trying to indicate subordination, but coordination. There are subordinating conjunctions which introduce clauses which are grammatically subordinate to the rest of the sentence. So when you have the word because or for, in order that, you have a main sentence, and then you have usually the explanation of it, which is subordinated to it. He is a good man because he finished school. That's a subordinate conjunction. Some more important classifications of subordinate conjunctions. The reason or the cause, given by the word because or since or for, result or purpose, again, the word that or so that, in order that, or conditional, if, comparison, as, even as, just as, time, temporal, when or whenever, or since, and concession, though or although. So coordinate clauses are related according to various relationships. They can be related based on a series or a progression with the word and, or a contrast or alternative with the word but or rather or nevertheless, or a conclusion or an inference, therefore, now then, or now. So on your last page, while many biblical sentences can be extremely complex, at the heart of each sentence is a subject and a predicate. Once these are identified, other pieces of the sentence may fall into place. The following example out of Hebrews 3:2 shows the majority of parts of speech that one will diagram. Mastering these is more important in the beginning than learning to diagram in more complex parts of speech and special conditions. So notice the sentence. He, subject, was, verb, faithful, that's the predicate adjective, right? Because it's verbal and it's modifying. But now notice you've got a relative pronoun acting as a subject of a clause. He was to him. There's your prepositional phrase with the relative pronoun, him. Who appointed him, right? Who appointed him. There you have your direct object of the verb appointed. As, there's your conjunction, a subordinate conjunction. Now we start a new line. Moses as the subject, was as the verb, modifying the verb is an adverb also. You're supplying the missing word, and then you say, what you do have in the text is, in all his house. So in house, what kind of house? All the house. Whose house? His house. So those two adjectives, in a sense, are on the house in this preposition phrase, in. So these are the parts of speech in a sentence from the Bible that we need to learn how to do. So the first step is mastering the parts of speech. The next step is mastering the form of a diagram. And the third step is then taking a passage, taking a verse, and looking for the subject and the predicate and a direct object, an indirect object, then looking for that which modifies the verb, modifies the subject, modifies the object, modifies the indirect object, modifies through a prepositional phrase, modifies through a verbal infinitive or a participle. That's how we begin to diagram. So, as Thomas Schreiner says, one of the great values of diagramming is it compels the interpreter to slow down, to think carefully through every element of the text. Diagramming is also helpful because it lays out the text visually. Such a schematic immediately shows the main clause, the main verb, direct objects, indirect object, modifiers, subordinate clauses, if any, and other key grammatical parts. Well said. So sentence diagramming also serves as a primary for the next step in discourse analysis, which is syntactical diagramming. And I've given you a couple of websites and things that you can look at to learn more about diagramming if you wish. So some of you are going, I know all this. Some of you are going, I think I remember this. And some of you are going, what the heck is this? In any event, we all are going to have the same homework assignment to try to apply this skill, this technique to the text.